This meeting is a budget hearing or anything?
Council as a whole committee.
Good evening and welcome to the Fitchburg City Council Budget as a Whole Budget Committee as a Whole Budget Committee session for the fiscal year 2014 budget with our department heads. Tonight on the agenda for May 21st, we have the Fitchburg Police, the Human Resource Department, the Law Department, and the Mayor. First, councilors, if you would, I'd like to start with the mayor going over the page on the revenue to give us the recap of what the revenue is for the year.
Yep.
Mayor?
The revenues are found on page 4 and 5. These have not changed significantly since the draft budget proposed to you, and in fact may change slightly again depending on what the Senate does. I think we've spoken to you in previous years that a local aid resolution usually happens early in the year, let's say February, March, or even April, so that we can set our local aid estimates. That has not happened for several years, so these numbers have changed from the House budget proposed to the House budget final to the governor's budget to the Senate budget. So any changes that might be made by the final budget, we will address in a supplemental budget. And sometimes the state budget actually is passed after we pass our budget. So every city and town is really in the same boat. So I'm going to have our city auditor help me out with all of these figures, but just to give you the broad overview, our revenue is basically broken down into a few major parts. Taxation, this is one of the biggest portions of our budget, and that is at $42.83 million. Then we have school-related expenses. This is in state aid for education as well as MSBA reimbursement, which is tied to our debt. We also then get state aid general, and this encompasses both the revenue that we get from the state and assessments where we have to pay the state for certain things. And then on page 5, these are more locally based. We have local receipts, which is made up of everything from a library fee to funds that we get for charges for waste management using our trash, to our ambulance contract, to reimbursements that we get for our enterprises. So that's the general overview of the things that add up and create a revenue figure for us. So once we create a revenue figure, then we base our budget on that to have a balanced budget. Dick, do you want to cover this?
I think the mayor pretty much summarized it very well. The total is $103,672,000, and that equals the amount of the projected or the budgeted expenditures for next year. I think she covered it in summary, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilor Hay.
Yeah, Dick, bottom of page 5, you've got available funds one time, $900,000.
Yep.
Could we?
Sure.
Give an explanation?
Those make up 3 council orders. One appropriating available funds from this year for $170,000. Another one is appropriating from stabilization fund, $580,000. And then there's also a transfer from the Treasurer's debt service of $150,000 from fiscal year 13 that would go be allocated to fiscal year 14. Let me just note on the stabilization fund, you may recall that the end of last year we ended with about $3.6 million. And even if the city, last year we appropriated $500,000 into that account. This year, the council and the mayor already appropriated $1 million into that account. So if we took back the $580,000, there would be a net increase to the stabilization of $420,000, which would bring it to $4 million at year end.
I understand that, Dick, but I have a question regarding that stabilization account. One, I'm concerned because I think stabilization account should be for one-time spending things only. But secondly, if this budget were to be passed by a 6-5 vote or a 7-5 vote of the council, and the order came before us for the $580,000 to take out of the stabilization fund, which needs 2/3, 8 votes, and didn't pass, this budget would not be balanced. Is that correct?
Yes, there's two orders, so everybody's aware, there are two orders that require a two-thirds vote. The stabilization fund and then the one transferring the money from the treasurer's debt service. So if they were not to pass, but if the...
By two-thirds.
Right, by two-thirds. You need 8 votes for those two to pass. It's a hard majority. It's 8.
Right,
So if they didn't pass, but the council has passed the budget would be passed. However, there would be an issue that would be hanging out there until the fall when we would need to balance the budget with either a supplemental appropriation or a supplemental reduction in accounts to make up the gap between the revenue and the expense. You'd be off.
that would need to occur before we set the tax rate.
Right. The state, that's where the state gets involved and makes sure the communities are balancing their budgets.
Thank you.
I guess my only other thing is between this budget, FY13 projected, and FY14 mayor, the only real difference where we went up $1.2 million in the revenue is basically all monies that's from within. We didn't get any, I mean, we gained some revenue in one spot, we lost it in the school, so we've gained and we've lost revenue from outside sources and from within, and the main difference between our 102,477 this year and our 103,672 from next year is basically that available funds one time. Correct? So we didn't get any more money from the state. We actually got less money from for the schools and...
Well, we got some slight increases from the schools, as you'll see between fiscal year 13 projected and fiscal year 14 projected.
Okay. Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. Councilors, this budget says one thing. We can't afford what the mayor wants to spend money on. That's it. That's the summary. And we haven't been able to afford it since the mayor's been in office, before the mayor's time. This has been what you call a baseline budgeting technique. When you put one-time revenues into a balanced budget, you create a structural weakness. Why is that a weakness? Because you have pillars for a budget. You have recurring expenses with your recurring revenues. The other pillar is one-time funds. That's on shaky ground as it is. You never want to use one-time funds to balance an operating budget. Why should the taxpayers care? Because it puts the city at risk in the future of not having that money there to cover the recurring expenses. Because once you put this money in here, it becomes the baseline, and it's going to be very difficult to get off of it. Look at the numbers. Overlay surplus is technically a free cash account. $380,000 was used 6 years ago. We are now at $1.6 million. The free cash usage has quadrupled in 6 years. We are not strong. We are still very weak. This is not my opinion. This is fact. Our bond rating agency has identified several times that the use of one-time money is a concern to them. And the treasurer confirmed to me offline that this does not help our rating. What is very concerning to me this year is we're using stabilization money to balance it. What are we going to do next year? Are we going to go into stabilization again? Or are we going to pray that we have enough free cash? I heard what the auditor said, and I'm going to be frank with everybody. That is a very creative way of how you spin this. Well, we put $1 million in here last year, so taking $500,000 out still leaves a net increase of $500,000. Did anyone here, when we appropriated the $1 million in free cash to Stabe, did we all think we were going to use that next year? I didn't. And I've heard everybody here, as Councilor Hay correctly said, it should only be used for one-time funds. I don't really know how there can be a disagreement on that. You never use that account to balance an operating budget. It creates a structural problem. We don't have the money to do what we're doing. This does not put us on a path to firm footing. And we heard a couple of weeks ago that our employee benefits are out of control. So ask yourselves a simple question. How are we going to address this next year and the year after that? This one-time money we're using is going this way. It's not going this way. So what are we going to do if this isn't there? We're going to have to make cuts. So what I'm going to do during these sessions, because I've had it, is I'm going to propose cuts across the board at a minimum to get us off that 580 that we're going to take out of stabilization, because that to me is a deal breaker right off the top. But what we should ideally work on is getting us off of the 1.6, because it's going in the wrong direction, folks. It's very concerning to me, very concerning, considering all the stuff we were told a few weeks ago. So I understand that department heads, every single one of them, are going to fight tooth and nail against cuts to their budgets. These aren't their budgets. They're the mayor's budgets. I have questions on budgets. I prefer to ask the mayor the questions, not the department heads. But I already am well aware of the fact that any cuts I propose, I'm going to get a ton of resistance on it. Because no one's going to sit there and go, sure, cut the budget. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to be very rigid in my cut recommendations, because we cannot use stabilization to balance this thing. We can't. We haven't done it in 6 years, and I remember before I was on the council, I heard Councilor Joseph, I heard Councilor Caddy, when I was growing up, talk about use of stabilization money. They were adamantly against it, and they were correct. That doesn't change now. This is damning to us. This is the first time in my tenure here we're doing this. If this doesn't concern everybody, I don't know what would, because what do we do next year and the year after that? We're not going to get any cuts in employee benefits. What are we going to do? So we better pray we get free cash by leaps and bounds, or we're going to have to keep either using stabilization, or we're going to have to make serious cuts. And what this budget does also is it firmly makes a reality forever that property taxes will continue to skyrocket, because there's no other way to attract more revenue. And the last thing I'll say is I did a lot of thinking over the last couple of weeks since the mayor's discussion with us on pension. And I really want to help her out. I want to help her out in terms of giving her suggestions on how to curb these costs in any way we can. I put a petition already to make our legal services privatized. I am going to put a petition in soon to change the employee matrix for department heads. I am going to recommend cuts across the board in this budget. And I'm going to make recommendations on future negotiations with employees as suggestions to the mayor when she negotiates as to what I think should be done to curb these costs, because they're not going down. So I'm going to try my best to work with everybody to try and get us into balance. This may be a balanced budget, but it's a structurally unbalanced budget, and this is the worst budget I've seen in 6 years because we're using STABE money, number one. And the free cash account has quadrupled in usage. I don't know how you can justify this. I'd be interested to hear what the mayor's going to say right now, but I don't know how you can justify this. This is a scary budget. Thank you.
All right. First, I want to say that we have never had a structurally balanced budget. I have never put forward a structurally balanced budget because we've had structural deficits, because we've had lawsuits, because we've had everything else. I have never proposed a structurally balanced budget. I have actually stated that. I state that in union negotiations when people ask me for more. I state it when we come to the table and try and negotiate health care changes. But what I see is, in 2008, we didn't even know what happened yesterday. In 2009, we were barely able to figure out what was happening today. What I told you when I passed in this budget early is that this is a quick and dirty budget. It's a budget that I'm going to give you early because I was looking for feedback. Feedback not because we have problems with this year's budget or fiscal year 15, but I've showed many of you projections to fiscal year 2040. And I specifically, when I put in this budget, actually before I even put in the draft budget, stated the reason why I'm putting this early is because we are probably going to go bankrupt by fiscal year 2020. Okay, so we can worry about this year's budget, and we can worry about next year's budget, but we have this big fiscal cliff. We are going downhill because state aid is disproportionate part of our budget, is not going up as our expenses are. It doesn't mean that I'm sitting on my hands. Everything I'm doing is trying to get us on stable ground. But you're asking somebody whose car is broken down with no money to say, oh, let's figure out how to get across country faster. Instead of saying, well, we had the car going, let's figure out how to have small amounts of money to maintain it and keep going. So we are definitely working as a deficit. All right, whether it's the CSO projects, or it's starting and building up a stabilization fund, or it's making healthcare changes, or it's, so on. We have been working on that, but it is not enough. The proposals that I have for myself, that I put on the table, the proposals that I've heard from the outside, those are not enough. Those might get us through this fiscal year, they might get us through next fiscal year, but they are certainly not going to get us to fiscal year 2020. This is why I brought the budget to you early. Now, I'm hoping that we will establish the budget board. I was also hoping for feedback between when I passed this in and now. And I'm not surprised that I haven't gotten much, because, you know what? This is hard. This is really hard. But this is why I said, let's put this aside. We can spend all of our energy, time and energy focusing on this year. But at some point, we also have to figure out how we're going to solve the crisis by 2020. So I'm hoping that we're going to have the time and space to do that.
I just see that we're a city of 38 to 40,000 people. Our expenses our revenue doesn't change all that much. We still have to provide services to the people. People still expect us to have more police on the street. They still expect us to get to a fire within 1 minute. They still expect us to fix the roads. They still expect us to get their birth certificates and all of the information that they need at City Hall, building certificates. The people expect us to continue to provide the level of service that we are today with monies that we don't have. We can change fees, okay, but people get very upset when we increase our fees. We can do Proposition 2.5 overrides, but they very rarely have a chance to pass in the city of Fitchburg. There's never any passion to pay. There's no passion to pay more taxes. There's no passion to pay to get your rubbish removed in order to put more police officers on the street. I don't want to pay more, I just want the same level of services. Well, without changing the formula or the equation, we're going to continue to lose ground, because we're not getting any more revenue from the state. We don't want to generate any more revenue from fees and things within the city. So in turn, the mayor has to be a little more creative on how to come up with a budget that keeps police officers on the street. We're still losing. We're not gaining. Even with the current budget going up a little bit and saying that we got to cut out, we're still losing police. We're still losing fire through attrition. The level of services, the DPW people are decimated from where they were 10 years ago. Fire department, police department, decimated from where they were years ago. So I guess the call for help to say, how are we going to get out of this? You tell me, because unless the state comes out with a revenue package that increases our state aid by 10% every year, we're not, and that's what we were living for in years past. State revenue always went up, state aid always went up, and cities and towns always had more money, and they spent it like there was no tomorrow. Okay, and we didn't put money into our capital equipment. We didn't take money from our sewer, our wastewater incinerator, where we were making money hand over fist. We used it to give raises and all kinds of things, hire more people, and now we're paying for the sins of the 90s when there was more money. So if there's a magic formula, I'm definitely open to hear it, because I don't want to take money out of stabilization, but I don't want to put any less police officers on the street, and that's all I hear from everybody that I've talked to in the last week. I don't want less police officers on the street, I don't want less firemen in the fire department, and I want my roads fixed. So do what you can. Okay. Councilor Reynolds.
I have a couple of questions. I'd like to ask Mr. Saracen, what is our current bond rating?
I believe it's A- with both Moody's and Standard & Poor's.
And what was our bond rating in 2007?
2008, 2007, it was like triple B. So it was a couple notches below where it is now.
Was it ever lower than that?
I don't believe so.
So we're still in good shape with
No,
that?
we're in a lot better shape.
Lot-
We're on the a very touchy area. When we were down to triple B, that was risky.
And then the $1 million that went into the stabilization fund, did that come from free cash?
Yes. Came from this year's free cash.
So we could, I see no problem.
So in a way,
with it,
we
yeah.
put in
Right.
probably more than what we
Right.
planned. Although I agree that with Council Di Natale, that structurally it's a concern.
Councilor T-Bone, yes.
So essentially, what's kind of happening is that we're basically not putting in money into the stabilization account this year.
No, what happens is the net amount that we added to the stabilization in fiscal year 13 will be $420,000. We put in $1 million about in October.
Yep.
What we would be doing is reducing that.
Okay.
I-
So we're
I-
not taking money from,
No,
Okay.
and when you go year to year, it is a spin. You want to put your best foot forward when you go to the rating agencies, and we definitely will tell them our stabilization went from 3.6 million to 4 million. We definitely want to tell that to Moody's. When we meet with the state, we don't tell, we give them a different version. We say, hey, we have concerns about this.
I have a third question. Are we receiving more monies, less monies from the state, the gambling portion of the state, which was initially set up to relieve cities and towns? Are they being prompt and accurate in what they give us?
They're probably prompt, but if you look at the mayor's budget, you'll see it went down from $10,400,000 back in '08, and now it's at $7,400,000. So it's
And is
gone
it-
down
is that
$3 million.
Is that consistent with the monies that the state has taken in?
I'm not sure about what they've taken in. All I know is
Are they returning it to a proper portion?
the other thing is there are some of the charges have gone up, the school spending, the school assessments have gone up.
I mean the lottery, I'm referring to the lottery
Right,
money.
the lottery has gone down, as far as what they give us.
And does anyone know if the money's taken in by the state has gone down proportionally or gone up?
I'm not sure. The only item that's gone up is the school, Chapter 70 money. That pretty much offset it.
Councilor Hay.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear. I understand Dick saying we put $1 million in, we're taking 580 out, but we are still taking money out. We're taking money out of the stabilization account. And the question is, when you voted to put money into the stabilization account, were you like me, with the understanding that we're putting money into stabilization to take it out for one-time expenditures? Or did you believe when you were putting money into the stabilization account that you were putting it in there to balance a future budget? Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. I just want to say that this happens every year, and I sit here and I shake my head because sometimes I can't believe what I hear. I haven't voted for a budget since 2008. I had all these concerns since then, and I keep hearing everybody talk about where we were 6 years ago. I got that. I know we were in a hole deeper than you could possibly be in. My point is, all the stuff we're talking about right now was not a secret 6 years ago. It wasn't a secret 20 years ago. We knew pension and health care was unsustainable. We knew that operations may have to change. We knew that using one-time money was not a good idea. Last year, when I brought the structural issue up, the mayor said having an unstructural balanced budget is better than having a structural one. She said that. Right after she said, it's not better. That's why I get frustrated, everybody. I don't know what to believe anymore. I get that the state hasn't come up with the money that is on par with expense increases, but to me, that is partly a cop-out, because where's our responsibility internally to do what we can? I say we haven't done enough, and I say that the city is not managed as good as it should be. And if I'm the only one who thinks that, fine. But 3 years ago, I was screaming at the top of my lungs when we added $2 million in new expenses with no idea of where the money was going to come from, except for a trust-me approach, and now look where we are. So I don't even know why I talk about this, because in the mayor, if I say 5 plus 5 is 9, or say 5 plus 5 is 10, somehow it's going to get spun around and make it sound like it's 9. Okay? I don't know what to do anymore. But if everyone thinks this is a great idea, wonderful. I know we have problems that aren't going to get solved this year, and I know there are problems we don't have control over. That's understood. But I guess I'm a little insulted that this is all of a sudden coming to a head now. I mentioned OPEB 2 years ago. I didn't hear any urgency 2 years ago. Now there's urgency. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just going at what I've been looking at. And I've heard people here say, well, our bond rating's better, the city's on the move. We only increased those expenses a couple of years ago because the state gave us a one-time kiss that we knew we weren't going to get again. I guess when you have a situation in the city years ago that was as awful as you can get, anything after that must be wonderful. Because no matter who the mayor is, this is reckless. This is not a plan that is good for the city. So if we want to provide services to the residents, fine. We'll just propel our demise even quicker, because we don't have the money to do what the mayor's proposing. We don't have it. That's the reality. Thank you.
Mayor?
I just want to be clear that it's within the council's prerogative to cut. So if the council believes that we are providing services that we cannot afford, the councilors can cut. It is within your prerogative to cut. Since I proposed this budget, I have not received a single recommendation for cut, including from councilors who wrote me in writing that they are going to provide me cuts, and did not. So to this date, I have yet to get a single recommendation for cut. It is within your prerogative to cut. If you feel like we need to cut in order to pay for pension costs, pension was a priority last year, it was a priority the year before, it's going to be a priority 5 years from now. I still don't know how we are going to pay for it. That is the challenge that is before us. I don't have all the solutions. I've asked for solutions. I'm asking for recommendations to cut. I have not received any. So at the end of the day, I have deadlines that I need to meet. I have a city that I need to run. I have constituents that I need to answer to provide services. So I cut a balance. I cut a budget that I think is appropriate to stabilize where we are right now, to provide information on dangers down the road, and to provide the best services that I can. It is within the council's prerogative to cut. If you believe that we are spending too much, please make cuts.
Councilor Caddy.
I wasn't going to say this, but Mayor, do you think we're spending too much on this budget?
I think that we're spending more than we can afford today and in 5 years. But I do believe that we're not spending enough for the city that I want to see. This is the
I
issue.
heard what you said earlier, and I read it in a paper a week ago. This is my 10th budget. I don't want to talk to you behind closed doors. We're going to sit here for 8 or 9 meetings in a public forum, and I think that all this discussion should take place publicly, not privately. You provided us with a budget. It's your budget. I'll let that go at that. But my point would be, did we make a mistake putting $1 million into our fund, or should we have not put so much? I mean, how does it look with the Department of Revenue that we take money, $1 million, and put it in stabilization, and then a year later we take $500,000 out? Wouldn't it have been more frugal on our part to only put $5,000 in stabilization, and then next year $500,000, and keep putting amounts and leaving that cushion so we're not taking money out of stabilization the next year.
Well, first, I want to be clear, the appropriation of the $1 million was within fiscal year 13.
I understand.
So,
But we didn't have to put it in stabilization.
Right.
We could have put 500 in stabilization, 500 in free cash.
you could have, well...
Then it doesn't show up on the charts that we're taking it out of stabilization.
Right, I think part of the reason why the mayor and the council do this is it shows less money available for other uses during the year. Maybe it would have been better, as we've done in the past, we would put for reserve for other municipal purposes. We could have done that, and then that could have been just transferred.
But my question is, what does the Department of Revenue think?
They're gonna look at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, and they're gonna see it went up to 4 million from 3.6 million, so they'll be pleased.
And we still haven't, we won't get our free cash for fiscal 13 until probably October again.
Right, it'd be the end of the September or early October, correct?
Are you able to anticipate what that would be now?
No. It's a lot tighter than last year. Last year, we had $4 million, which was a great year. It's a lot tighter than last year, but there are some accounts that are doing well, and some of the revenue accounts that are doing well. Not as great as last year, though, far lower than last year, but...
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Counselor Hay.
Yeah, a couple of things, I guess. One is I'm concerned that the mayor acknowledged in response to Councilor Caddy that we're spending too much. If we're spending too much, what I'm seeing is that the mayor then is proposing a budget that she believes has too much in it and wants the council to make the cuts that she wouldn't make. The second piece is, the reality is, if we look at pages 5 and 6, which is for the revenues, we're showing last year was 102,477, and this year will be 103,672. Then you turn over to page 7, and I know we haven't gotten there yet, but we're getting there. Show 102,120, and requested was 105,552, and the mayor is authorizing 103,672. Good Lord, where would we be if the mayor had actually said yes to all the requests to go from 102 to 105? We've got to make these two pages balance. We need to make them come in line with each other. And if the council, I guess our dilemma as a council is our only authority is to make cuts. You know, if we could sit here as a body and argue and debate and conclude that we think this is an important piece, this is where we take money from and we put the money over here, or this is what we conclude is the service that we want to provide and we're going to cut back on this service, then I think this body would really have some authority and have some ability to shape and inform what we think is appropriate in this budget. We don't have that ability. We don't have that authority. The only thing we can do is cut. And in the past, I have always been opposed to cutting, simply for cutting's sake, because everything is bare bones. And if we cut, then we're going to hurt a department, we're going to hurt employees, we're going to hurt residents by not supplying them with the services. But we are to a point where this body needs to do something, because there is not enough money to do what we are proposing to do. I don't know the answer. I'm going to sit here and listen to, I hope every counselor makes proposals, but something structurally needs to change within this process, or I agree with the mayor. 10 years from now, we're in a boatload of trouble. And, we need to do something. Thank you.
Counselor T-Bowman, yes.
I just have to agree with you in the first part of what you said, Counselor. Hey, just because, again, if we wanted to create the budget and put it together, we should run for mayor. She's the mayor, that's her job. I applaud you for taking the steps that you've taken in your tenure, in basically going from a non-existent budget to some numbers, to understanding where we're at, to getting a picture of where we're going. And, you know, for me, and looking on the outside, seeing how it's been in phases. And yes, there's urgency, but we have about that 5-year window where we need to start thinking about what we're going to do long term. So the approach that we take today in this budget session is I'd like to hear from the police department, because if we're going to cut, if we're going to look at these things and start cutting on muscle, I want to know what are those things that are needed to be effective. I know everyone's going to say, well, we need the whole thing, but I think if we can have that discussion, I think that would be more constructive than, you know, sitting here and pointing fingers, because I could do that, because I haven't been here. I've only been here 2 budget sessions, and I can point fingers all around for folks who've been here longer than me. So that's basically how I feel.
Okay. Counselor Tran.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been on the council before this mayor came on board, and back in the days, I knew a councilor by the name of Jody Joseph who would be livid if we were to spend money that we didn't have, or take money out of the stabilization account to use and balance a budget. And that's what we're seeing with this budget. I've said it many times when the department heads came before the council, was that we're relying too heavily on grants and one-time revenue to pay for personal services and services that we provide to the residents of Fitchburg. And that would come back and bite us. And we're seeing it now. What I'm confused is that we know there's danger down the road, 2 or 3 years from now, but we're not dealing with it now. We should be dealing with it now. We shouldn't continue to spend and then say, we see danger down the road, but spend now and spend next year, and then we'll deal with the danger when it comes head on. So what I see with this budget is that it's going to be difficult for this council. It's going to be difficult for all the councilors in this chamber, in this room. But when it's time to make difficult decisions, we have to step forward and make those decisions and prevent that danger down the road from being there by the time we get there. So I think it starts with this budget. And if the mayor didn't take the opportunity to make the corrections in this budget, then it's in our purview to do so during the sessions before us. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Unless you cut $4 million, we're not going to be able to deal with the pension costs. Unless you cut $5 million, we won't be covering pension, OPEB, and the structural deficit. So if you're looking for a budget that covers OPEB and the structural deficit, you're looking at cutting $5 million.
Okay. Moving on to page 25. Police Department. No?
That's your problem. You don't want to listen to where your problem lies. You can't spend more than you take in. And there is a solution, but you
Officer.
don't want to listen to my solution. You can call me and invite me, and I will tell you, you won't spend all this bickering. And I'll tell you how. First of all...
Officer, could you have this gentleman removed, please? Thank you.
Remember what I said.
Okay. Police, personal...
Neighborhood meeting, that's all.
Police, personal services, $4,388,339. Total benefits and stipend, $1,544,158. Total dispatch, $330,663. Total civilian staff support, $132,630. Total office and supplies, $35,700. Total travel and training, $40,000. Total vehicles and equipment, $267,800. Total building maintenance, $187,985. Total on the mayor's budget. Total police, $6,927,775. And the FY14 projected or budgeted was $6,910,282. Councilor Hay.
So we're showing here that the request was $7,375,503. Is that a request that you put in, Chief?
Yes, yeah, that would have been, that would have been additional officers, right? I don't know if that was mine, yeah.
I think it was a couple more we asked for.
Yeah, yes.
So you were looking to go from 6,910 to 7,357, mayor allocated 6,927.
Yes.
What,
Yes.
what does that do to you?
Well, that we reduced it, the motor vehicles, purchasing motor vehicles this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one thing I want to speak to the council first on, in 2008, when I came to Fitchburg, within 3 months, I had to cut approximately $600,000 to $700,000 from the budget. We did that, and the results of the last 5 years, the Fitchburg Police Department men and women reacted and positively reduced crime in the city. We've had a great 5 years. Make no mistake, if the council was to ask me tonight, what can we do to help you? If you give me 100 police officers, I'll make this city, the city of Fitchburg, Massachusetts, the safest city this size in the country. But I know, I've owned businesses, I'm a realist, and I know where we sit. So when there were comments made this week that we're talking about data and talking about technology, then on the other side, we're talking about an aging police department, we're all right. We realize that. We all realize that. But we all promise, the deputy and I promise you, that we will continue to make this city safe, no matter what happens. I hope you don't cut the $5 million from my budget that we just spoke about, but I think this is a lean budget that you're looking at. It's limited. We can't do the things, the proactive things that I would have liked to have done, to put people on the streets walking in neighborhoods. I'm a community policing man from way back. I implemented the first community policing in the state of Massachusetts, in the city of Lowell. It works, but the reality, that costs a lot of money. Putting officers walking in specific beats costs an awful lot of money. So when I start looking, and the deputy and I sit there and collaborate before each bid that goes out in January, we look at where we deploy people. And we deploy people on needs. We look at data. Years ago, when the mayor says, I'll give you an extra officer, I said, no, give me a crime analyst. I needed somebody to really know what's going on there. They can look at the new things that are coming out, the new innovative things that we do in policing. And as a result of that, you've seen better policing. Our license plate readers on the cars reduce crime in the city. It's a tool. It's just a tool. It doesn't replace a police officer and never will. We need more officers because we just need officers because we're all getting older. As we all get older, we retire. And as we retire, we have to replace officers. And the disappointing thing for police officers, it takes a year to train an officer. Make no mistake, that it takes roughly a year, between 9 and 12 months to train a police officer. So that takes a long time. So we always have to pre-plan. We have 3 officers in the academy now. They will be out in August. They hopefully will be on the street sometime early or middle of the fall. That will help us tremendously. So when you look at the budget, or when the deputy and I looked at the budget with Robin, and we constantly look at the budget throughout the year. We look at money. We look at where we're spending. We're cognizant of spending. I'd rather give money back than spend it. I've said it here before you, and I'll always believe in that, because if we can do something better and less expensive, we will do it. And those things are innovative things. For instance, we met last week with a gentleman that is selling a new product for a computer program for the cruises. We're going to have iPads in the cruises. No more of the tough books, these big computers that cost between $4,000 and $7,000. An iPad will cost us $800. Crazy why we shouldn't do that. We got to do that, and we will do that. Those are the things that we look at. Those are the tools in policing that make it easier. Cameras. I've spoken in front of this council for years talking about cameras. We found out at the Boston bombing that cameras solve that. They looked at pictures. They looked at hundreds, if not tens of thousands of pictures, and they identified someone that they thought. And yes, a victim came forward and said, I think this guy looked like it. Then they went right to the picture and says, this. So when you look at cameras is a way to reduce crime. It's just it's technology, data-driven. We focus on that. We need officers because we're going to get always older, no matter how long and strong we are. We're a mid-sized police department. We're stuck in the middle because what happens is there's only so many specialty jobs, and a specialty job is a job where an officer with seniority can go and take, for instance, in our department, a records manager's job, report review job, or a detective's job, which I think the detective's job is much harder than patrol. But they can take that if they as they move up in age, that they feel that they can't get on the street and handle someone on a call because if it may be violent. So there's some of that, but there's not many of those jobs because the size of our city. We're 40,000 people. Department's 72. It was at one time 90. Up to 80 when I got here, and now we're down to 72 with 56 patrolmen. Could we use more? Yes. What's that number? You know what? At this point, hearing what the councilor said tonight, anytime we get one extra officer, we're happy. We're glad. We just recently applied. I think we pushed a button on the application tomorrow for 4 school resource officers through the COPS office, the federal government. And the reason why we had to apply for school resource officers, our crime rate doesn't dictate us applying for more officers for the street. It's lower than they require. That's a good thing, but it hurts us on the other end when we try to get more officers on the street. So we're applying for 4 school resource officers, so at some point, if we get one, we'll be happy. And we'll go on and we'll make things work. But make no mistake, we'll make sure our main objective in the city is public safety. We're the first line and probably the only line of defense for this whole city. And none of us take that lightly. From the newest patrolman to the guy that just retired last week. We take that seriously. So this is a lean budget. We've looked at it. We went over 3 hours today again before we came here. We can live without some cruisers, Council, to answer the question. Yep. Because we'll have to live with it. It's ideally, we'd like to always have a transition with the cruisers because they work all the time. At least some of our officers go home to go to sleep. The cruisers don't. Their office is working all the time. Even when it's idling, it's worse for a cruiser to idle. So, we always like that, but we'll figure it out. We'll get through until next year. That's all. Because we have to. I'm not going to sit here and scream, I need more cops, this is ridiculous. We'll figure it out. Our detectives, we had a shooting yesterday morning. Within 48 hours, we identified the suspect. We had a warrant for his arrest. That's how good we are. So we're doing the work. No one's sitting there with their feet on the desk saying, we're sick of this. There's nothing to be sick of. So as we move on, and talk about this, this is what we got. That's it. Our overtime is down. We will probably come back before you at some point to ask for additional overtime, because it's down. We had to make some cuts there, because we did not want to cut an officer this. We just didn't want to cut a police officer, and we're not going to if we don't have to. So that's how tight the budget is.
Counselor Hay.
Yeah, Chief, if I could just follow up on that. While I applaud you for your being a realist and understanding the finances and where we stand, I'd like to go backwards a little bit and touch on something that you talked about with the technology's great, and that's helpful in all of that. But with the number of police officers that you have, are we, you, the department, only being reactive, not being proactive, as you said, without community policing, without other things? And I understand that the numbers have gone down, and that's reassuring, and that makes people feel good, and you guys look good, and everybody's doing the thing. But the residents out there, do they feel more comfortable when they see more officers on the street? Is their perception that they are safer, if there are more officers?
I would think the perception of that, yes, absolutely. Make no mistake, they would think that, because I do. But they do see officers. I mean, our officers are on the street. That's what I mandate, that they don't sit around the police station. So,
You're to be applauded for that, but would more officers be a good thing?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Counselor Pavea.
Thank you. Chief, I want to say thank you very much for, and all the officers that are below you, for doing such a great job. We see it every day. But there's something else we see, and I want to know how this has happened. We have a certain number of state police in our city constantly. How does this affect your job, or everyone's job? And was this called for?
We had, a couple of years ago, we started an initiative, it's a DDAC patrol, that we focus on hotspot policing, they call it. There's a million things we do in this, but hotspot policing, that we do an analysis of where accidents occur and the major crime happens, we overlay it and look at those spaces. So as a result, the state police has signed on with us as their partner. They come in at least once a week or maybe twice a week when their CAT team is available and focuses on those areas.
Okay, that's good. Very good answer. 'Cause we never see, we never heard any reason for them to be here, except maybe we would probably think.
Motor vehicle fatalities all the time. So there's always maybe a need for an expert in those fields that they can give us. If the deputy wants.
Irregardless of who got the ball rolling, I want to say thank you, because they are a great deal of help in this town. So thank you for them as well.
Counselor Di Natale.
My question is for the mayor. What was the methodology of having, and this applies to the fire department as well, what was the methodology in counting uniform allowance as part of the pension?
It was part of the overall union negotiations.
And you believe that's a prudent move, considering our cost increases? That a stipend for uniforms would be applied to retirement?
There are other things that the city received as part of those union negotiations that I believe were an equal trade. I do believe that it's a major improvement from prior police contracts where there have been a lot of giveaways without the city getting anything in return.
So why aren't any other departments that get clothing allowances get that perk?
Because union negotiations are done one union negotiation at a time. So, for example, when I do fire, I'm with fire. When I'm with police, I'm with police. And if you want to talk to the other side, police will always say that fire has more, and fire will always say that police has more, and
There's suggestion number one from me on how to cut pension costs or reduce it by whatever fraction. I know it's not going to cure everything, but there's one suggestion that I have. My next question is regarding animal control services. Is it contractually dictated that the animal control officer does not have her shift during the hours where the most high frequency of calls are coming into the police department, so you don't have to divert your own resources to those issues and cut down on overtime? Because I seem to recall in our prior discussions that there were a lot of calls in certain parts of the week, but the ACO is not in operation at that time, so either she has to go on overtime or you have to move officers from patrol to handle animal control issues. Is there anything stopping the city from moving her shift to where all the calls are happening on a frequent basis? Is that contractual?
I'd have to look in her contract. I mean, she works 7:30 to 3:30 Monday through Friday.
Is that when most of the calls are occurring, or are they
Well,
occurring after that time?
You know, I think I did an analysis to you folks. They seem to be like 4, 5, 6 in the afternoon. I think that was the concentration of them. But there is plenty of stuff for her to do during the day, too. You know what I mean? I mean, we could maybe change her hours, you know, if there wasn't a labor issue. Like I said, I'd have to look at her contract. But I'm not sure what we gain from that. You know, I'm not sure if we'd gain enough to save a few $100 in overtime. I don't know.
And another point I want to bring out is Leominster's police budget is $600,000 less than ours. How are they getting by? I'm comparing them because they're a similar-sized city, similar population. I mean, are they understaffed over there? Or is it structurally different than our department? I don't...
Same size department, roughly. I meet with Bob Healy once a week. I just don't know, I'm not sure what the question is, though. Are they under... I'm not saying, I'm not sure if you're making the assumption that I'm saying we're understaffed, that we're...
No, I know you're understaffed.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out if they're the same level as you guys, but they're $600,000 less. Maybe that's not even a question for you. Maybe that's, again, contractual issues or something. I don't know. But I have done this every year. I have proposed cuts in all budgets, to be fair, taking into account what's been spent over the years and taking into account that even with a cut, there is some contingency still in there. So I don't know how we're going to do this year. Maybe make a list, because I have a list, and I am going to give my list, and if anybody has a question on why I'm making this recommendation, I'll gladly give it to you. I understand the police department has done a fantastic job in managing what little money it gets, but there were line items throughout this budget that I saw that I thought were in excess given the last 6 years. And I understand we can cut, and I'm not advocating that the money that gets cut that I recommend, if it were to approve that from this council, it may not even pass, leaves your department. And this would be a comment to the mayor, but my focus is to get you those 2 guys that you lost. And I think you have well enough cushion in here that you can reallocate some of this money to keep those 2 people, at a minimum, because I don't want you to lose them. We may have a disagreement on that. We can talk about it at a later date, but I have a list here, if you'll bear with me, that I'd like to have recorded for a future vote, if that's okay. I'd like to have $8,000 removed from shift differential, $29,000 removed from holidays, $5,000 removed from out of grade, $5,000 removed from civilian police dispatcher overtime, $5,000 out of overtime animal control, $1,500 out of travel and meetings, $20,000 out of mechanic, $800 out of clothing allowance for mechanic, $10,000 out of gas and oil, and last but not least, oh, you want me to give it to you? Okay, but, sorry.
Email it.
$12,200 for motorcycle leasing. That's a total of $96,500 of cuts that I'm proposing, with my preference that be allocated to cover the 2 retirements that were not filled. If it doesn't cover all of them, it's a step in the right direction, but that's where I'd like it to go. But I'm just pointing out to everybody that the average 6-year return of money by the police department was $275,000 per year. And even with these cuts, there's still about $160,000, $175,000 in contingency above what they have historically spent. When it comes to the police and the fire department, my goal with my cut recommendations is not to have it taken out of their budget, but to have it reallocated within to address some of the deficiencies that we as a council may think are more pressing. So, and I make these cuts with the understanding that these are the mayor's numbers. I'm not making these cuts that saying that Chief Demore, this is the mayor's proposal, this is what I think should be done, my own personal recommendation. So even with these cuts, I am still highly confident that the police will still return money back to the city. And I will send you that list, and I will copy the chief on it so he's aware of it, and that's all I have right now.
Any other comments? Police Department budget, Councilor Bean, sorry.
Again, Chief, thank you for what you do, and thank your men and women that are out there that keep our city safe. Just a couple questions. One on the two police officers we're talking about not replacing. How is that going to affect your overtime budget, and where will we...
I just don't know who those two are.
So there are two you're not replacing them?
Yeah, I read it. It said in FY14, 2 are retiring. They haven't told me. And I know that's been a comment out there, so I don't know where that came from.
Okay. So, oh, sure, Mayor.
If you look at the police budget, you'll see that specifically under patrol officers, it's 56. It was 55 last year, 54 the year before, but in fiscal year 11, it was 58. So from, I know from the union perspective, and, even one of my goals, it was to try and look and see if we could get up to that 58.
Grants. I notice on here you've got one grant that looks like it's reducing your budget by $100,000, but you get a lot of grants, don't you? And what is the total grants you have to help offset some of the...
I know it's listed here, I just don't have a total figure in the, for instance, we have a lot of $5,000 grants here and there. The $100,000 grant, it's from the E911.
Right.
That's focused on dispatches only.
Okay. Is that an ongoing grant, or is that a one-time grant?
That goes year to year, the 911, but the number fluctuates. I think it goes by number of 911 calls or something roughly. The hiring grants, we had a hiring grant, it expired a year or two ago. So we don't have any more hiring grants right now, although the chief spoke about the SRO grant. The thing about those is that there's a match, usually. I think in this one it's 25% or 23% or something like that, so we'll have to deal with that if we get the grant. There's also a retention requirement, and you have to be very careful about that. If I know that there were some inquiries from the federal government on the last hiring grant we did because some people left in mid-year, and they could come back and ask you a couple of years later, how quickly you move to hire somebody to replace that person when they left, and when you got to go back a couple of years and try to figure out, I'm not sure if we were in compliance or not. I mean, I hope we were, but that's something you have to be careful about. And in this grant, that's supposed to be the same thing. So you always have to be mindful of that. The grant could be for 3 years, and then you have to keep them for another year after that, so you always have to be looking ahead.
So none of the officers right now, the patrol officers, are on any kind of grant program? Those are all off of that?
Right. We're using the 911 money to fund dispatcher salaries.
Dispatchers, okay. Thank you.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, Deputy Chief, about the SRO and Monty Tech, how long have we had a officer up in Monty Tech as an SRO?
We haven't. Starts this fall.
Okay. Is that going to be, that's entirely funded by Monty Tech?
Correct.
Is that officer one of your 56? It says on the sheet, patrol officers, 56. You have 56 of them. Is that officer that's at Monty Tech one of the 56?
Yes. That position's in the academy now.
Okay. And his job or her job will be to be an SRO at Monty Tech, and then when school's done, they're back at the station.
Back at the station.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Chief. When does Monty Tech expect to have that person?
The fall.
The fall. Okay. It's obviously needed at Monty Tech, so I'm glad to see it's going to be there, and glad to see they're picking up the tab.
Yes, I
Thanks,
agree.
Chief.
Counselor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, page 27, Civilian Support Staff Systems Manager. What is the responsibility?
Tri-City?
No, Systems Manager, Civilian, under Civilian Staff Support, the bottom.
Yeah. Yep. That's in a, he does, we have a part-time that does all the alarm billing.
Okay, it's not IT.
No, it's, they'd never changed that in a line item. That's just what he,
Yep.
that was what he used to do. He retired, he came back as the
Thank you.
alarm biller.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, councilors.
I have one question. No, never mind. I'll ask you off.
By the way.
Off the, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have a question, sorry. As far as the animal control officer goes, if reducing their time to half-time, how would that work out? And I only ask myself, and I may be wrong, but from listening to my constituents, I'm not hearing a lot going on there as far as the responsiveness.
I can just say, for a city this size, with the animal problems that we have, one animal control officer absolutely is not enough.
I can answer
Yeah.
that. In 2007, when things started to get really bad, the animal control officer worked for me. I was a captain at the time, and there was some discussions about laying her off. I was intimately acquainted with the workload of that job because she worked for me, and my recommendation was that they didn't lay her off because I knew, we have been working on responsiveness issues too and answering, and I think we've made some improvements there. But it was my recommendation not to do it, and it happened anyway. And within 3 or 4 days, if some of you remember, people were bringing dogs to City Hall, tying them to the door, things like that. Our police officers, they're the next ones, these guys, they'll try, but, they're not really trained in that stuff, and it didn't go well. It didn't go well. So we learned from that, I think. I did.
So, and that does require a full-time
I think so.
position.
I think so.
And make no mistake, without that animal control officer, a police officer's going there. Nobody else in the city. There's no other service, no public safety service, but the police.
As a matter of fact, we've, a lot of the investigations that she gets involved in actually spill over into criminal matters. And so we've actually sent a detective to some training on animal abuse cases and things like that, so that when she does get a case that it might be, a little more involved, then we can assign a police officer to help her out. I think we've done that once or twice already.
Thank you.
I think by ordinance, if we didn't have an animal control officer, it defaults to the chief of police and his designee, so he would be the other
Driving the truck.
Councilor Di Natale, you also?
Control, Counselor asked a pretty good question about the operations. Do we feel that, this is an interesting question this is a question I'd like to learn more about. The dog licenses, the animal fees that we charge, I believe they're not even close to what it costs to enforce the animal situations in our city. Are we thinking of maybe increasing those fees to cover these costs? Or is there a mechanism that we can go through legally to recoup money that we're spending on things that are occurring through the animal issues that we can get back? Because there are other services we do where we charge back the resident. Why would this be any different? I understand a lot of them are criminals, some of we can't find, but in the cases that we could, is there any way we can recoup some of the costs of what this is costing our resources? But more importantly, is our dog license fees in particular, is that really on par with other cities and towns? Or if we have more issues than other cities and towns, should we not be charging more in the fees to cover these services?
It's possible, but there's no revolving account or anything for that anyway, so whatever, I'm guessing whatever you collect goes to the general fund. I think Anna would know better than I would, but we don't see any of that back.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. The money, we're getting fees, but they're not going to you.
Right.
They're going to the general fund, like a lot of fees that we generate, yeah. Okay. Something to think about our fee structure right now, and there has to be more talk about the operations of it, because, you know, I still feel strongly about having maybe some of her shifts or the position shift moved in accordance with where the volumes of calls are, to do whatever we can to reduce the need to have the patrol officers actually take time out of their busy schedules to handle those issues. Just a thought. Thank you.
I could probably, without even looking at it, almost guarantee you that the people that are legally paying their fees and registering the dogs are not the ones that are tying up the dog officer's time. So you'd be taxing somebody that...
How to recoup some of this money? I mean, it's getting out of control.
Yeah.
They tell you to keep the dog. That causes...
Thank you. Moving on, councilors, to page 14, Human Resources. Human Resources. Resources budgeted $87,285. FY14 projected $83,145.
Bernie Stevens, Human Resource Director for the city. Have been for about the last 14 years. And you have before you the FY14 budget. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Go ahead, cut him a penny.
I have a cut, but Mr. President, but I don't know if it's prudent to just, and I was going to list them out in public, because I didn't know if the public wanted to hear them, but
Yeah.
I will send Mr. Saracen the list, but I'll just say them publicly. $1,000 out of training.
Councilor Tran.
Just going to piggyback on Councilor Di Natale's proposal there and pose a question for the Human Resource Director. Why is training going up from 300 to 1,500?
Well, what I tried to do is to have some, right now, we're doing very well, I think, with customer service in the new location. I'm constantly out in the front office listening all the time, giving up my secret here, I guess, to the employees, but I listen all the time. I think the customer service has improved tremendously since we've moved, but I think there are some points that we should improve on. And that extra money, it's really not extra money, because I tried to delete some other money from the other accounts. But I think that we should bone up on customer service, again, even though we do well now. And that's what the money was for.
Who would benefit from the customer service training that you're talking about?
People in the Treasurer's Department, people in the Assessor's Department, people in building, people in the clerical and building, and City Clerk's office, the people that deal directly with the folks, with the residents.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor T-Bone, yes.
That was my question about the training, because it looks like it jumped up significantly. Definitely, I think everybody at City Hall does a good job, but I think that sometimes folks could be a little more sensitive to different cultures and all of those things. So, you know, these are folks that are coming in to get services, but also, you know, pay for permits and, you know, try to open businesses and things like that. And I think that, you know, I just, you know, when it's $1,000, you know, budget for something that could improve our efficiency, our
image.
reach, our image, I mean, absolutely, yeah. I think it's worth it, and it's a drop in the bucket to cut.
Councilor Hay.
Personal services, is that contractual, the increase?
I believe it is, yes.
It's a step. Department heads and not the managers.
Thank you.
Doing a good job. I
Thank
think that the stuff we see in the grievances and things like that by the attorneys has come down, and I think that that's a direct result of customer service on your part. So
I have two types of customers, mostly internal.
Yeah.
But we've been very fortunate. The unions, the grievances have gone down. The managers, I think, are doing a very good job in settling grievances even before they get to me. So things are going, I think, pretty well right now.
Right. Thank you, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much for
Thank you.
your time and effort. Moving on to page 15, the law. I don't know how you, I mean, we've kind of skipped reading line by line. Is that okay? We can just go to the bottom line. Page 15, legal services. Mayor's FY14, $261,600. The FY13 projected was $267,700. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Mr. President and councilors. Good evening. I guess I'd like to start a little bit with observing that there's been some changes with the law department from the past. Last year, as you know, Mike Ciota retired, had been a long-time city solicitor, and we were trying to go forward with a new plan, which has really been evolving over the past year. One of the things that Michael had been doing was code enforcement, and there was a separate budgeted amount for code enforcement of $20,000 that was allocated to reimburse him for cases he brought in court on code enforcement matters, since that was a primary concern of the city. Since then, Mark and I have sort of realigned some of the duties that we had. We felt that Mark was in a better position to do the code enforcement, and he's largely been, that's been a major component of his work, is doing the code enforcement work. And we felt that what we really made more sense for us, since I retained many of the duties I was still doing as assistant, in addition to additional duties as city solicitor, that what we would propose is that we reallocate that money, since Mark is already doing the code enforcement, but we need more, I guess, funds for the support staff that we have in our offices to help us do things. With the technology, to some degree, there is a greater need for staff, quite frankly. For one example, in workers' compensation cases, you have to file the records electronically. They have to be encrypted, and that's something that it makes sense to have support staff doing, as opposed to an attorney spending his time doing that. So what I think actually things have gone pretty well. Our budget actually represents a decrease from last year, not a substantive one, but we're working, I think, hard to try to reduce the city's legal expenses. We have taken more of a role in doing some of the labor negotiations and dealing with some of the labor grievances and collective bargaining. We've been fortunate that we've had the assistance of Labor Council, and they've been very, really, quite frankly, generous with working with us in on an almost case-by-case basis, so that if it's something that Mark and I can handle, we've handled it and been able to do that without, having to go to our Labor Council, Deutsch Williams. They have to come out from Boston, and the hours can add up. We still do need their, I think, backup on some of the more complicated matters, and so we still are providing, in the budget, funds for labor. I don't think we're in a position to take it over entirely at this point. So that's the basic change in the budget would be to reallocate the money from code enforcement to administrative support, because Mark is largely doing the code enforcement as a major part of his duties and under his salary. I think that gives you a general overview, and if you have questions for us.
Councilor Bean.
Through you to the city solicitor. On the labor supplement, the $50,000, was that used for during negotiations or more towards litigation or other issues within labor?
I didn't examine the bills, Councilor Bean, to get an exact, account of that. I would say it's roughly half 50-50 between litigation type things and collective bargaining. I think there was more, maybe more of it earlier in the year, in the fiscal year. We do have, quite frankly, money left over in that account. That because Mark and I have been doing more of it, we have been able to. But we want to keep the $50,000 in the budget for that, because it's a hard thing to gauge, because every year it can fluctuate. Some years, and you can see from the past years, sometimes we've had a lot more labor problems, and it's cost us more. But
Do you, either through you or through the mayor, do we have contracts open now that'll be negotiated in this next fiscal year, or, okay?
We're working on 2 right now.
Which ones are those?
It's police and the FAMUS, the Specialty Skills Managers Union. I believe we will actually have 7 in the forthcoming year, leading up to July of 2014. I mean, we'll start negotiations. I'm not sure if we'll start late in the fall or early in the winter, but obviously we'll need some time to do that over the next year.
The other thing that I'm, somewhat concerned about is judgment awards. Do we see anything, is there anything going on within that you know about that should give rise to a concern of a judgment award pending against the city in the next year or two? Is there anything pending out there now that you think could be?
Well, without going into discussing litigation per se, we could. I don't. I'm hopeful that we have one matter out there that is a labor matter. It's actually an MCAD matter, and that is something that was scheduled for a conciliation conference, I believe now in late August or September. It's a hard one to gauge. That's something that might require us to chime in. The other thing that we have to try to balance is the deductibles that we have for different claims. I mean, we do have insurance, but we have a fairly high deductible of $25,000 on public official coverage. So that's one where it's hard to know. Usually, if it's a department that has funds that can be utilized towards that, that department will cover that. The school department, water, wastewater. But there are some departments that don't have it budgeted, and that's, quite frankly, sometimes when you will see us come before the council to say, we don't have any other money to pay for this, and we need to ask for funds to pay that deductible.
My only concern is, Mr. President, maybe at some point going into executive session to hear about these potential liabilities that we may have or judgments we may have. So as we're doing this budget process, I don't want to all of a sudden, be surprised in the middle of the year saying, this case is now before us. But I just know in the past we've always been somewhat updated on what the current legal or litigation situation is with the city. What's pending, what the lawyers think, may happen, may not happen. But I think as a fiduciary of the city here, as councilors, we should have some knowledge if there's some pending problems out there. Not saying they're going to happen, but I think it's important for us to understand the big picture.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm handling 2 or 3 cases going on right now, and we've been successful up to this point, but people do file appeals, and so we're in some of the appeal processes. So, if the council would like to hear a little more detail, John and I could certainly, provide that.
Yeah,
I think that would be important before we finalize the budget, because I think something we should have knowledge of, so as we go forward. Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the school department still have their own lawyer or lawyers?
I believe so. They do.
Is there still that belief out there that we can't take, the law department that we have in the city of Fitchburg and use them not only for city of Fitchburg problems, but school problems as well? I just don't know if do you need 3 or 4 lawyers to do both?
I should qualify that to some degree, because we do handle the workers' comp matters that come out of the school department. But the, and I haven't, at least as yet, haven't been involved in any collective bargaining with the school, and I think largely the mayor handles that, along with Mr. Stevens. But I do know that from time to time they do have an attorney that they, dealing with special education issues that they do employ. I'm not sure what that is in the school department budget, but it's conceivable that we could do that. I'd have to say right now it's a case of I think we've got a lot of issues, a lot of concerns that we're working on, and while it would be nice to be able to take that on at some point, there's only so many hours in a day, and at this point, that's something we'd have to look at.
I just always have had a feeling that, the school department has their own lawyer, and the rest of the city has their own lawyer, and, we're playing on the same team.
And again, I'll clarify further. I deal a lot with the school department concerning purchasing matters. Contracts that the school department is going out to, along with the purchasing department. So I guess it's a case in point that we should maybe take a greater role in overseeing the school department. But we are involved with it, but not exclusively.
It's a thought.
Yep.
Thanks, John.
Mayor has a comment on that?
I guess putting on my hat as a school committee chair, we primarily have 2 lawyers for the school department. One is a labor attorney. Another one is the special education. The special education is highly specialized. I would recommend that we continue the course of having a specialized lawyer for special education. We've also had a history of using specialized attorneys for labor. We've done that for both the schools and for the city. Sometimes it's the same person for both. In the case of the city, we have tried to take labor issues and internalize them between our HR director, myself, the city solicitor, and the assistant city solicitor. So we're still on a path where I believe we do need specialized services for labor, and we do need specialized services for special ed. So those have to be different people because those are different expertise. But we are, as much as possible, trying to lower those costs by having these 2 gentlemen here and our HR director take on more of those issues. So it's sort of in that direction. And if we can take that final step and internalize all labor issues, then, we might just do that.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. As you gentlemen know, I've put forward a petition to privatize these services, i.e. keep you both, but pay you under contract basis. Obviously, you're not going to agree with that, and I understand that, but I'm in a position where I look at other cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth who do that, and most notably our neighbors, Leominster, employ a private legal firm who bills them by the hour, and on average, their cost is $185,000 a year, whereas ours for the last 5 years has been about $315,000, not including the judgment awards or any of the big items that hit us. So we're spending $130,000 more on average a year than Leominster, and that doesn't include all of the benefits. When I put it forward, I wasn't happy putting it forward because you both do fantastic work. And when I brought this up last year, it got into a discussion of the personal. And I can't stand when that happens, because this is a business, and it's never about the job performance of the two of you, or anybody else for that matter, that this would impact if it were the opposite. And I'm not trying to pick on you, but it goes without saying, we get very good services out of the both of you. That's why I would hope that the mayor would keep you if this were to go through. I just would prefer a service where we get billed for the hours that are spent, and quite honestly, if they cost more, I'm fine with that, because the point of this petition was to curb the pension and the health care costs, which the mayor has asked us to help her do. So I would be quite surprised, honestly, if the mayor wasn't on board with this, because there are other towns and cities of a similar size that do it. Why we're different, I don't know. I'm sure I'll hear the excuse that we get more bang for our buck, but when I look at that by comparison, I ask, why not us? Why don't we do that? Would it make sense maybe to wait until we have new individuals in the job? I don't know, but, since this problem is so imminent, that's why I put it forward, because it's something we can do legally outside of union negotiations. So I know you guys aren't going to agree with it, but I brought it up last year. I feel like for the amount of services that Leominster gets with their firm or for their contractors, and I read what they provide, same things that you guys do, they cost a lot less, but more importantly, they're not paying any benefits. And that's the biggest movement of why I'm doing this. And I hope you don't take it personal. I hope no one takes it personal, because it's not about that, quite honestly, for me anyway. So we'll see where that goes. But I do have a couple of cut recommendations that I'll send to Mr. Saracen. $9,000 out of administrative support and $2,000 out of Westlaw and research. And I guess we'll talk about the other issue that I brought up earlier at a later time when that petition comes before the council as a whole. Thank you.
I just had one quick question. You said there was a...
Can I respond to?
Just the...
On the cuts?
Oh, the cuts.
I really wasn't prepared. I could address the petition, but I didn't think we were going to really get into that tonight on your petition, Counselor.
No.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
and I would
I just brought that up.
make my arguments at a later date about that. But on the cuts that you proposed, first on, as far as the Westlaw, basically that's a contract that we have with West for Westlaw research, legal research. That amount was actually being covered by IT. I'm not sure if it was because it was an introductory thing or if the IT had a grant, but the IT department was covering that cost. This year, they weren't going to be carrying it, and so whether they cut their budget, but we were putting it up.
Why wouldn't that have been in IT budget then, if they're covering it? Is that just for this year?
That's for the forthcoming year, yeah.
For the forthcoming year?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because the cut I recommended was because going back to 2008, the highest we spent was $1,300.
Right.
And you're asking for $4,000. And what we just talked about earlier, even with a cut of $2,000, that still leaves you $2,000, which is $700 more than what you've spent on average.
Again.
But why is the IT...
Is that, I don't know, I really don't know, but the IT department was covering that expense for the law department. I would have to look at the IT department's budget, but they apparently were covering it, and now they're not, and so the agreement we have with Westlaw would be for...
Because they're not covering it, it's going to cost more now?
No, it's costing the same amount, it's just coming out of our budget, not the IT's budget.
I never saw Westlaw research in anywhere in IT's budget. in the last 5 years.
So
that's news to me.
It, so.
Okay. But that's what I'm going to propose.
Can we just have an explanation on that for
Yeah,
the next meeting?
Yeah, I think they'll be in tomorrow.
Okay.
But I know that when we merged, when the IT took on all of the different computer-related services, maybe that's when he took on, or they took on that $3,000 bill. But I think he could explain it. There's computer support, city departments and so forth. It's probably within that, but I don't know.
I mean, the contracted services support line?
It could be one of those. I'd have to defer to Trevor.
Who made the decision for IT not to pay that anymore?
Councilor Hager, we'll get your questions coming up. You all done, Councilor Dina?
Yes, thank you.
I just had one question. Do we have a special counsel for the MCAD case?
That's usually covered by insurance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, the MCAD matter, we do have counsel provided by our insurance company, Maya.
Councilor Hay.
First question would be, who made that decision? If it used to be paid by IT, and now it's not being paid by IT, did IT just say, well, we won't pay it, and then we'll have $3,000 more in our budget?
I think it was, Counselor, largely out of recognition. I'm not sure. We got it, and they were willing to pay for it to start with. We were happy to get it because we do use Westlaw, for legal research. It's a very great aid for us. It just seemed that, it is for the law department.
I don't expect you to have the answer, John. I'd just like to see if there's anybody who knows the answer.
Yeah.
Now, let's get back to the other questions discussions I want to have. Councilor Di Natale makes a good point when he ties this whole thing into benefits and pensions and retirement and all of that. Because the last city solicitor, who went from part-time to full-time in 3 years, increased his pension by $14,000 a year for those 3 years. If he lives 10 years, or collects for 10 years, that's $140,000. If he 20 years, it's 280. Do the math. That's a chunk of change and a lot of money, and it needs to be considered and thought about. But what I'm looking at here is when the city solicitor was part-time, the city solicitor got his pay, and he received money to compensate his office staff, supplies, whatever, all of that stuff that supported him. At some point, 5-6 years ago, I'm not sure exactly when, they decided to eliminate that amount of money as support and put that into salary for the solicitor. And so he could then determine how much he pays his people and does everything with that amount of money. Combining them made it easier, and they said. But combining them also increased the benefit that the solicitor was receiving and increased everything down the road because that salary is higher. I'm not arguing that. My point is, now we're looking to add $24,000 in administrative support. That administrative support was part of the increase that the city solicitor got when they went from $58,000 to $91,000. And when they went from $56,000 to $91,000, it was from part-time to full-time. And I'm not begrudging the amount of time that John spends, the amount of work that he does, but structurally, everything has changed here. And to want $24,000 for administrative support, Councilor Di Natale is making a recommendation to cut it $9,000. I'm making a recommendation that we eliminate it completely. Thank you.
If I can respond, Mr. President, the reason, and it may seem like it's smoke and mirrors, but it isn't, Counselor. The thing here is that the determination was made. It made more sense to increase the salary, and this, as far as Michael was concerned at the time, he was not in-house as he did the last couple of years. The salary went up originally, and those services were added in to the salary. But there was still the $20,000 that was allocated additionally, above and beyond that, for code enforcement. And all we're saying is that because of our I guess, our strengths and the way we have organized the department, what I'm doing now is I'm working effectively for less than Michael was, because I still have the administrative support, and I'm virtually full-time. I mean, I do maintain my private practice, but because of the system that we have here, but I'm, pretty much full-time. And Mark is maybe not quite as much full-time, but he still spends a big chunk of his time on city matters, too. The $24,000 is basically the $20,000 that was code enforcement. That now, because that is coming in under Mark's salary, and this, by doing it this way, quite frankly, it avoids the increase that it would otherwise go towards a pension. So I think it's a sensible way of addressing it, and I would hope the council wouldn't cut that, because quite frankly, I've actually given up quite a bit of my private practice to be able to take on the duties of city solicitor, much more than I did as assistant.
And all I can say is that my secretary now probably devotes 15 to 20 hours a week just banging out documents for the city of Fitchburg, whether we file lawsuits, whether you have to have it served by a sheriff, copies, whatever has to be done. So, I mean, it comes out of my pocket to pay her, and I understand that. But she spends a substantial amount of time focusing right on the city's work beyond the other part of my private practice. So it's a way of trying to compensate for that time, that's being used for that at a much lower rate.
All set? Councilor T-Bowman, yes.
I just recall the last year's conversation about this, and about the conversation about whether we go towards a per diem type of fee, or if we stay here in this, as you all are employees. And I totally understand the rationale behind OPEB if this is our big issue and it's a liability. So I kind of understand both, and I'm on the fence with that and the cuts that are proposed. But Westlaw Research is a search engine, which is probably why it went in IT. And I'm assuming that $4,000 is the price for the whole, I guess, shebang, unlimited research that's essential for any lawyer who's practicing law to have access to. Otherwise, then they're going to be in the library for hours looking at big books. But the other part that I wanted to address as well was, I think last time we talked about the average, and we looked at the numbers. And I think I came up with, I asked you all how many hours you worked for the city, multiplied that by, I think, a very low hourly figure, which was about $150. But as I learned more, that is not the average hourly rate for an attorney in this area even. So we're looking at probably $250 an hour. So when I did the math and the number of hours that we put into it, I remember quite frankly saying, wow, we're getting this in a bargain. And I get the long-term, projection of what we're looking at spending. So I guess it's figuring out how to weigh those things out in the long term versus, what we're getting now, So, just keeping that in mind as we make these decisions about cutting, is just weighing that out and what those numbers are and the differences in those numbers are. It seems to me, city solicitors, I guess I have a question. You're technically an employee of the city, but you're an appointed position, correct?
Right.
Right. So that means if this mayor leaves and a new mayor comes, you could be gone.
Right.
Okay. All right. So, this is now what we're looking at to sustain, which, is something that isn't also, when we're thinking about the long term, that's something to consider.
I'd like to think if Mayor Wong did leave, if that the new mayor would continue to appoint me. But I guess I would just comment on the fact I started working for the city when Jeff Bean was mayor. And thank you, Jeff, although sometimes I wonder about that. My career path took a very different path at that, and I quite frankly, I don't regret it. I've enjoyed all the time I've been here. And I don't want to get maudlin about it, but I do live in a different town, but I think of Fitchburg as my city, and I would like to continue to work and try to make things better.
So, Dina Talley.
I will probably not do the 2,000 for Westlaw now, because the only reason why I recommend it is because it's never incurred on your budget. And I didn't know that IT was incurring it until today. So that was news to me. So I'll take that cut from me off the table, since it's going to be borne by you now. I'd like to know when Mr. Bonilla comes in tomorrow where that money is hitting his budget. But for the 24,000 cut to administrative support, the reason why I recommended 9 is because the mayor took out 15,000 from code enforcement, and the solicitors explained to us that that code enforcement money that was cut was moving into administrative support. And I figured, well, if we're cutting 15,000 from code enforcement, why don't we have 15,000 in administrative support if that is largely tied to that line item? Why cut 15 from code enforcement and then put 24 in administrative support? Probably because it's not covering entirely the code enforcement. That's the big crux of it. So I said, well, apple for an apple. Make it 15 instead of 24. And that I won't budge from. But we can talk about the privatization at another time. Thank you.
Councilor Reynolds.
The additional support, I assume that's secretary?
Yeah.
Increased money?
Yeah.
Does that incur future cost to the city upon retirement or something like that?
No.
It does
No, it
not, so there's no questions about the future in that?
Right.
Thank you.
Councilor Tran.
John, Mark, I appreciate your responsiveness and your great work and services when I need them, and you guys are always returning my emails, so on that, I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Mayor?
Can I just make a public service announcement? Because I got this call in the middle of the meeting. Unitil has planned power outages. They're starting now. They're going to be for about 4 hours. They are saying they did send letters out to homes, but it's Highland, Cedar, Myrtle, Pacific, Briar, Lincoln, Clinton, Orange, Pearl, Concord, Cully, and Rice. And it's for planned upgrades to the system, and they said it's going to be about 4 hours.
When?
Starting now, pretty much. It's 11 o'clock at night, which is,
So,
it is almost...
if you weren't watching this, you are no longer watching
TVs
this.
will go off in about 25 minutes. 11 a.m., 11 p.m., but people are telling me they're getting outages now.
Thank you.
Could I just one last thought, because I'm not sure if we'll get back to discuss it when you do propose the cuts. And one of the things on the administrative support, and I do appreciate Councilor Di Natale's concerns there, is just those expenses that we do incur by having our support staff do a lot of work. It's not cheap running a law office, and I know this isn't your concern, because this is where it's my problem and how to manage that office, but the costs that we have, roughly about half of it would be attributable to the city, and what we're proposing here would not come close to half, quite frankly, of that expense, and that would be divided between Mark and I. It wouldn't be, I don't think it would, quite frankly, be 50-50, Mark, sorry, but it would, probably help assuage some of that expense. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you. All set? Mayor? You're up. Page 13.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here to answer any questions you have.
Mayor's mayor's total budget, $165,578. Current year, $149,897.
I think the only thing I will say towards this is that I still would like the city at some point in time to look at and explore seriously a city manager or other form of government. But that's a multi-year approach, has to be voted on by the public. But I think just as our legal expenses have gone up because things are much more complicated.
Power just went out at the college?
Yeah.
Oh, is it Amber Alert?
Oh.
Not for around here.
Any questions?
President, is that when we changed the ordinance for the mayor's salary, and that was to take effect the next, after the election, and it's supposed to take effect January 1st, I believe. Why wasn't that considered for the next fiscal year rather than fiscal year 15?
Half of that's it's after January,
I saw
so
half
it's
of that.
$10,000 more instead of $20,000 more, which is a half a year increase.
Why wasn't the whole entire increase take effect?
It's effective January 2014, so it's only 26 weeks at the new rate. So it's
Okay,
half the
so
year
it's-
at the old rate.
If they're there from January to January, they'll
Okay.
have $80,000.
What time is it? It's late.
I'll take a motion to adjourn, or all those in favor? Opposed?